We have a question over here.
The question is for Phil, especially on the platforms. For all of us which are not part of the gang of four, recommend create planks, create platforms. What role do you think does an evangelist play to explain the platform? To give the example of Salesforce and their outlet. The way they influence the market far exceeds the size they have. Mark Benioff, with his role of evangelism, explaining the platform and reaching the wider audience, does a fantastic job explaining how Salesforce.com changes, that platform changes. So how much importance do you assign to the person, the evangelist who explains the platform, and how much do you assign it to the platform itself?
It's an interesting question, and it sort of supports my theory that I've started a discussion, I haven't ended it. I haven't specifically addressed that in the book, but I do talk about the iconic nature of the leaders of the Gang of Four. Steve Jobs obviously recently passed, but it was Steve's company. Mark Zuckerberg is singularly identified with Facebook, ditto Larry and Sergey with Google, and Jeff Bezos with Amazon. So if those people leave, what happens to the platform? I'm hard pressed, and there definitely are emerging platforms out there. I think it's no coincidence that Benioff is the face of Salesforce.com. For better or worse, that makes him the target if you're Larry Ellison, but it also, okay, I know Salesforce, that's Mark Benioff, right? There are emerging platforms out there like Twitter and WordPress that don't have as public figures, but I'm hard pressed to think of too many powerful platforms these days without a figurehead, for lack of a better term. I go in the book, I talk about how when Rupert Murdoch bought MySpace, did anyone think that, now MySpace is saved? Right? Nothing against Rupert Murdoch, but is anyone really going to mistake him for another Mark Zuckerberg? So I do feel like you need to have people leading the charge, if you like, because I agree with everything that's been said so far. The platform is very dynamic. I think, to Sherrick's point, you can lose people as a consumer arguably as quickly as you can lose people now as an enterprise system. So again, and this is where Adrian and I would have some very interesting discussions, I think B2C and B2B has been blurred, right? And then you even, the question before, I thought you said B2E, be an employee. So again, it's just this very different model, and the old IT model of a 2-year cycle and deployment and vendors and support, and just, it had to give. But my first book is called Why New Systems Fail. And I worked on these projects, and I joke with people that I had to write this book because if I didn't in 2008, I would have needed to see a shrink. Because I kept working on these projects that were blowing up. And it's funny listening to Sherrick talk, because I said to myself, even if I liked doing 2-year-long ERP or CRM projects, and I was getting kind of tired of it, this ship is kind of sailing, right? Because of open source and the cloud and SaaS. And how many hospitals or big organizations needed a payroll and accounting system? Not that many, right? So, I mean, is a company of 50 or 100 people going to spend $300,000 on an Oracle license? They'd be insane, right? So things have gotten a lot cheaper and faster, but I think it doesn't hurt if you have someone out there who's widely considered to be very dynamic. I don't know if it's necessarily a requirement, because everyone can talk about the benefits of the community and the ecosystem, but who is sort of, I don't want to say control, because I don't think it's necessarily a linear relationship, but I think it does help if you have someone who is very identifiable. And if you look at the Gang of Four, you have some pretty iconic leaders.
But isn't that true of any company life cycle, where you have someone who's identifiable and an entrepreneurial driver until the company becomes institutionalized? Well,
sometimes that's been the case, but I'm hard pressed in some cases to think of the heads of certain companies. I mean, again, I'm not Rain Man, and you can always Google things, but certain leaders I think have had more success than others. And I think that there are challenges today. It is a new skill set. There's a reason, just looking at Google for a moment, they're not afraid to fail. And I think that's built into Larry and Sergey's, and to some extent Eric Schmidt's DNA. A different kind of leader, I would argue, would not have made that company as successful. Conversely, a different kind of company with a different kind of problem like HP or Yahoo, I don't think that putting Larry and Sergey in charge would all of a sudden turn them around in either.
The difference I see today, it's really about speed, and I think, Sherrick, you really, the speed at which you build that ecosystem and you get that that conglomeration of customers around what you're doing. The fact that you have to have these partners in place, you have to be able to serve that customer for life, I think it really speaks to, if you contrast that, for example, with Groupon. and where they're failing right now is they're not building out the platform. They're a one-off shop, they're saying, great, this is good, but all the Me Too's have come in. They haven't built that loyalty system and way for people to engage and say, I'm going to keep going back to Groupon because they're going to have the best partners, or they're going to have the best prices, and they're going to give me better. They're just starting now to give better prices to people who come back to their platform, but they're kind of late to the game now in that, and that's why I think they're struggling. So building out that ecosystem, getting that rolling very quickly is one of the very important foundations to success today.